In our news tonight, Jordan holds the Israeli government responsible for the shooting and killing of Jordanian citizen Mohammed Abdullah Salim al-Kasaji in Arab East Jerusalem. Computer security experts struggle to contain the fallout from cyber attacks that demanded ransom from users and threatened to destroy their data. And finance ministers and central bankers from the group of 7 rich countries gather in Bari, Italy to discuss issues facing the world economy. Good evening and welcome to the news at 10. Jordan has held the Israeli government responsible for the shooting and killing of a Jordanian citizen in Arab East Jerusalem. Minister of State for Media Affairs Mohammed al-Mummini said the Foreign Ministry through the Jordanian Embassy in Tel Aviv is making an inquiry into the details of the killing of Jordanian national Mohammed Abdullah Salim al-Kasaji. Jordan strongly condemned this heinous crime and demanded that Israel, being the occupying authority, provide full details of the killing. Kasaji had left Jordan recently on an Israeli tourist visa. He was among a tourist group who traveled through Sheikh Hussein Bridge in North Jordan, but did not make it back with the rest of the group. Jordan voiced its full support and solidarity with Saudi Arabia in the face of terrorism that targets people indiscriminately, condemning a terrorist shooting that targeted the Qatif province yesterday, killing and wounding several people. The government urged concerted Arab, Islamic and international efforts to confront the threat of terrorism and evil forces in the region and across the world. The government also expressed condolences to the Saudi people and leadership and wished those injured a speedy recovery. The Saudi Interior Ministry had earlier announced that a group of terrorists targeted a development project in Al-Musawwara district in the eastern province of Qatif, killing a Saudi child and a Pakistani man and injuring 10 others. The ministry said the terrorists also targeted innocent civilians and used explosives during the attack to obstruct the project and to hide their criminal activities using the abandoned homes in the neighborhood. A World Bank delegation on a mission in the region met here in Amman with the Ministers of Education, Water and Municipal Affairs to learn about the impact of Syrian refugees on the kingdom, with a focus on vital sectors. The delegation, comprising members of the World Bank Executive Board, listened to a briefing on the challenges confronting Jordan as a result of hosting 1.3 million Syrians living in camps and other towns and villages across the kingdom. The education sector, for one, according to Minister Omar Razaz, suffers crowded classrooms, prompting schools to work 2 shifts, among other contingency measures taken by the ministry, including the creation of informal and remedial programs to meet the needs of Syrian school-aged children. Water per capita has dropped down to less than 100 cubic meters per annum due to stress on water resources, noted Minister of Water and Irrigation Hazem al-Nasser, calling for collective international effort to assist the country find new water resources. Minister of Municipal Affairs Walid al-Masri said the cost of services offered to Syrians is estimated at $2 million annually, only 30% to 40% of which are paid by donor countries, while the remaining sum is covered by the Treasury. Separately, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development Board of Governors has chosen Jordan as its chair for 2017-2018 and South Korea and Serbia as vice chairs. The selection of Jordan was made during the Board of Governors' 26th annual meeting, which convened in Cyprus on Wednesday and Thursday with the participation of Minister of Planning and International Cooperation Imad Fakhouri, who is a board member. Fakhouri said in a statement that members of the Board of Governors had unanimously chosen Jordan as the venue for the next annual meeting of the Board and Business Forum, slated in May next year by the Dead Sea, with the participation of 70 nations. In the occupied West Bank and in what is seen as a first democratic exercise in years, Palestinians voted in municipal elections. With no legislative or presidential elections in sight, The municipal ballot is considered a popularity test for President Mahmoud Abbas and his Fatah party. About 800,000 Palestinians were expected to vote for 145 local council representatives in the West Bank, but not in the Gaza Strip. Months of political and legal wrangling preceded today's elections. According to a Fatah candidate, the elections are to tell the world that there is democracy in Palestine. Hamas said the Palestinian Authority had made a unilateral decision to go ahead with the vote before an agreement on a legal framework is reached. Over to the Syria crisis, and the United Nations says it is looking for positive contribution by the Syrian government in the upcoming Geneva talks. UN Deputy Special Envoy for Syria, Ramzi Ramzi, made the statement at a press conference after arriving in Damascus and meeting Syrian Deputy Foreign Minister Faisal Miqdad to discuss preparations for the upcoming talks. Ramzi said there will be no direct talks between the Syrian government and opposition, and that meetings will be brief and focused. UN Envoy to Syria, Staffan de Mistura, has said a new round of proximity talks with Syrian government negotiators and with the opposition will take place in Geneva from the 16th to the 19th of this month. De Mistura wants to take advantage of what he described as promising developments made during the Astana talks. One of the agreements in the Astana memorandum is an exchange of released detainees from both sides, a point that has nearly been finalized. As part of the evacuation agreement, hundreds of Syrian rebels and their families continue to leave the besieged Damascus suburb of Barzeh. State news agency SANA said 1,246 people, including rebels, left the Barzeh and neighboring Tishrin districts. They are the second group to leave as part of a local evacuation deal with the government. The first batch of evacuations from Barzeh took place last week. On the ground, meanwhile, the Syrian army has taken full control of a small airbase in eastern Aleppo countryside that was held by Daesh, aided by heavy aerial bombing by Russian and Syrian air forces. The airport was briefly stormed by the army's elite forces last March, but Daesh managed to repel that attack on the base they had held since 2014. Russian and Syrian jets have also intensified their attacks on the town of Maskaneh, the last main town in the region west of the Euphrates River in eastern Aleppo. War-torn and suffering shortage of food and medical service. Now, an outbreak of cholera in Yemen has killed 51 people in 2 weeks, according to the World Health Organization. WHO has identified over 2,750 suspected cases of the acute infection in Yemen since April 27th and is opening 10 oral rehydration therapy centers in the capital Sana'a to try to stop the spread. The upsurge follows a previous cholera outbreak in the country in October 2016. According to WHO estimates, around 7.6 million people in Yemen live in areas at high risk of cholera transmission. Sana'a is the worst hit with 34.6% of the cases, while other cases were also reported in Hudaydah, Hajjah, Ib, Ta'az, and Aden.
The 4 children of this family are all suffering from diarrhea. One of them is seriously ill. There are 6,000 cases of acute watery diarrhea across the country, and we know more than 130 of these have been confirmed to have cholera. The situation is truly alarming, and organizations like UNICEF, along with partners, are stepping up our efforts to do all we can to keep.
Computer security experts struggle today to contain the fallout from the audacious cyber attacks that demanded ransom from users with the threat that their data would be destroyed. Overall, more than 45,000 attacks were recorded in as many as 74 countries. Cybersecurity experts identified the malicious software as a variant of ransomware known as WannaCry, with users confronted with a message on their monitors that read, "Oops, your files have been encrypted," and demanded a ransom to restore access. Here's the story.
Hackers exploiting malicious software stolen from the National Security Agency executed damaging cyber attacks yesterday in almost 100 countries. The most disruptive attacks have been reported in Britain, where hospitals and clinics were forced to turn away patients after losing access to computers. Doctors could not call up patient files, and emergency rooms were forced to divert people seeking urgent care. In all, 45 health service organisations in England and Scotland were affected.
I think there will be lessons to be learned from this sort of example, but I think it's wrong too to focus entirely on the different types of software that have been used in somewhere like the NHS. And this is a major cyber attack, an international attack. In fact, the response has been good in the UK, and I hope we will be able to continue to disrupt it.
French car maker Renault was among those hit by the global ransomware cyber attack. So was production at Nissan's manufacturing plant in Sunderland, northeast England. German rail operator Deutsche Bahn said its systems were also infected. And in Russia, some 1,000 computers at the Interior Ministry were frozen, while havoc was wreaked on tens of thousands of computers elsewhere. The attacks amounted to an audacious global blackmail attempt spread by the internet and underscored the vulnerabilities of the digital age. Cyber extortionists tricked victims into opening malicious malware attachments to spam emails that appeared to contain invoices, job offers, security warnings, and other legitimate files. Transmitted via email, the malicious software demanded ransom before users could be let back in, with a threat that data would be destroyed if the demands were not met. No details were available on whether victims were paying the ransom, starting at about $300 to unlock individual computers, or even if those who did pay were able to regain access to their data. By late night, the attacks had spread to more than 74 countries, including Ukraine, India, and Taiwan, with reports of attacks from Latin America and Africa. The attacks are the largest ransomware on record, but the scope of the damage is still hard to measure. Though it could take months to find who was behind the attacks, a mystery that may go unsolved, whoever was behind it alarmed cybersecurity experts everywhere, reflecting the enormous vulnerabilities to internet invasions faced by disjointed networks of computer systems. Alia Tuqan for the news at 10.
And to Paris, where the stage is set for tomorrow's handover of power by President François Hollande to President-elect Emmanuel Macron. 3 ceremonies will take place tomorrow, starting at the Élysée Presidential Palace in the morning with the handover of power. Then Macron will attend a ceremony for the unknown soldier at the Arc de Triomphe and end with the town hall, where the new president will be welcomed by Paris mayor. After the handover, Macron will name an interim team to run day-to-day affairs, pending the outcome of the parliamentary vote, which takes place in 2 rounds on June 11th and 18th. Macron was elected on the 7th of this month with 65% of votes in a runoff vote against Marine Le Pen. Finance ministers and central bankers from the group of 7 rich countries gathered for a second day in Bari, Italy, to discuss issues facing the world economy. Fighting the growing threat of international cyber attacks topped the agenda, as well as getting a clearer picture of U.S. President Donald Trump's plans on important policies, especially trade. Addressing the meeting, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin said the United States reserves the right to be protectionist when it comes to trade. Here's more.
Presenting a united front. Finance chiefs from many of the world's leading rich nations meeting for a second day in southern Italy. The aim for the G7 and central bankers on Saturday is to join forces to fight the growing threat of international cyber attacks. And the timing of the discussion couldn't be more apt. coming after a global cyber attack infected tens of thousands of computers in nearly 100 countries on Friday. According to a draft statement seen by Reuters, the G7 will say cyber incidents represent a growing threat for their economies and that appropriate economy-wide policy responses are needed. Secretary of the Treasury to the US, Steven Mnuchin, arrived later, but with a smile on his face after signing an 100-day economic plan with the Chinese. Tense trade talks have dominated the meetings after Trump's criticisms of financial regulation and trade. But members have successfully persuaded the US to maintain a commitment to free trade, a pledge which will strengthen links between the nations.
Back to home news, and from Qais to the Red Sea, Jordan's trail has placed the kingdom on the world map of adventure tourism. 170 trekkers and adventurers who set off on the trail on March 31st arrived today in AQABA to a celebration led by Minister of Tourism Lina Annab. Adventurers from Jordan as well as 14 Arab and foreign countries completed the 650-kilometer trail, passing through 52 villages and the diverse ecosystem of the country from north to south. 60 families along the way offered the trekkers a variety of services, from accommodation, food and refreshment to tour guides. The Jordan Trail Association, in cooperation with the Ministry of Tourism and funding from USAID, created the annual adventure to promote Jordan as an adventure tourism destination and contribute to local community development. In the latest string of ancient discoveries in Egypt, a burial site replete with at least 17 fully intact mummies has been unearthed. The funerary site, uncovered 8 meters below ground in Minya province south of Cairo, contained limestone and clay sarcophagi, animal coffins and papyrus inscribed with Demotic script. The burial chamber was first detected last year by a team of Cairo University students using radar. The mummies have not yet been dated, but are believed to go back to Egypt's Greco-Roman period, a roughly 600-year span that followed the country's conquest by Alexander the Great in 332 BC. Egypt is hoping recent discoveries will revive interest among travelers to its iconic pharaonic temples and pyramids. And actress and comedian Melissa McCarthy took her impersonation of Sean Spicer, the White House press secretary, to the streets of New York City. Imitating Spicer's look and dressed in a dark suit with slicked back hair, McCarthy rolled through Midtown traffic on a motorized lectern in a shoot for Saturday Night Live. McCarthy is due to host the show tonight, when she's expected to revive her portrayal of Spicer as a gum-chewing shouter who berates and threatens journalists for asking probing questions. Her outlandish impersonation of the often aggressive press secretary has drawn acclaim from viewers of the television show.
Sir.
Lewis Hamilton took pole position at the Spanish Grand Prix for the second year in a row, with Ferrari's championship leader Sebastian Vettel alongside the Mercedes driver on the front row. Hamilton's teammate Valtteri Bottas, a first-time winner in Russia 2 weeks ago, qualified third, with Ferrari's Kimi Raikkonen fourth. Dutch teenager Max Verstappen, who became Formula One's youngest winner in Spain last year after Hamilton and then teammate and 2016 champion Nico Rosberg collided at the start, will start Sunday's race in fifth place for Red Bull. Brazilian surfers put up big numbers as they advanced through the early rounds of their home World Surf League WSL event at Saquarema Beach near Rio de Janeiro. Adriano de Souza, currently the highest-ranked Brazilian in 4th place in the WSL Championship Tour rankings, advanced to the 4th round with a total score of 15.67 out of a possible 20 to win his heat. Gabriel Medina, 2014 WSL champ, also won his round 3 heat to advance with a total score of 14.30, while Wiggly Dantas managed the best score of 3 with an 18.27 to move on. The 3 Brazilians are scheduled to face off in Heat 1 of the 4th round when competition resumes. And finally, the weather outlook. Moderate weather continues for the rest of tonight with northwesterly light winds. Tomorrow, hot conditions prevail in most regions as a further rise in temperatures is expected, reaching a high of 31 degrees Celsius in Amman, while the Gulf of Aqaba should expect very hot conditions with northerly moderate winds and slightly high seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. A reminder of our top stories before we end the news. Jordan holds the Israeli government responsible for the shooting and killing of Jordanian citizen Mohammed Abdullah Salim al-Kasaji in Arab East Jerusalem. Computer security experts struggle to contain the fallout from cyber attacks that demanded ransom from users and threatened to destroy their data. And finance ministers and central bankers from the group of 7 rich countries gather in Bari, Italy to discuss issues facing the world economy. We've reached the end of tonight's news. I'm Dana Abusham. Thanks for watching and have a good night.